Frugal living and living well are not mutually exclusive. I think when you first embark on a frugal living journey, it's really important to not just prioritize your financial goals, but your personal preferences and your lifestyle. And as soon as you're able to do that, you really hit a frugal living sweet spot that's more sustainable for the long run. So for me, even though I like to live below my means, there are still certain things that I will splurge on that align with my values and where I'm currently at in life. So these are the expensive, quote unquote, things that I still splurge on, even though I live frugally, and how I fit them into my budget without being too extravagant on my spending. The first expensive thing that I don't compromise on is living downtown in a walkable city in a high rise and comfortable building. So for me, this means downsizing. My apartment that I just moved into recently is about 200 square feet, which for a lot of people might be way too small to live comfortably, but for me, it's more than enough space. I've actually found since I started living more frugally that smaller spaces work better for my lifestyle. I live alone and I work from home. It's just me and my cat, and I don't know, I find that I'm just more comfortable in a smaller space. I joke to my friends that my apartment sometimes feels like a terrarium and I'm just like a little hamster living in here, but it's kind of nice. And I didn't want to have roommates. I didn't want to live in the suburbs. I really wanted to be able to walk everywhere. And I had to really research to figure out how to make that possible. So before moving to Montreal, which I've lived here in the past, I lived here for over a decade, so I already have a built-in friendship group. I know the city so well. But when I moved back to Canada after living abroad, I was exploring all options. I wasn't really tied to a specific city. I was open to new experiences, and I pretty much looked all over the country to see what my options were, and I still ended up coming back to Montreal. A lot of that reason was financially. I think Montreal is still one of the only truly affordable cities in terms of big cities in Canada. So my rent here is $14.50 a month, which is about $1,000 US. And that is pretty much as cheap as you could possibly get living in a big city in Canada downtown. I was living in Halifax before, that's where I'm from, and I was paying a little bit more than I am now to live in a not so great part of town. There wasn't great public transit, there were no amenities in the building. And then I was looking at Toronto, I looked at Vancouver, Victoria, I was even considering Alberta, but the cost of renting a place that ticks off all of my boxes, so modern, in the center of town, has amenities, feels safe, you just couldn't get what I currently have anywhere else in Canada. And I feel like there are drawbacks to that. So living in Montreal, for me, it's okay because I'm a freelance writer. So I write for mostly American publications, but I do feel like it's nice to have the knowledge that you could get a job if you needed to when you're a freelancer. And living in Montreal, it does come a little bit more difficult because even though you can get by speaking English, if you want a full-time job, especially in my field, which is journalism, even marketing, you could say, you absolutely need to speak French. So I think that's a deterrent for a lot of people. But for me, I speak very decent French, I would say, but I'm just not confident. So I chose to opt for the lower cost of living in Montreal. And as a result, I will be taking French lessons to kind of future proof my income. So, if freelance writing does take a dip, I would be able to go out and get a job after studying business French. But I think my point is just that there's a trade off when it comes to cost of living. And I think for me, Montreal is that sweet spot where it's still relatively affordable, but there are concessions that you have to make if you live here. But like I said, living centrally, especially in a city that I'm familiar with, it has so many perks. This building has a gym, so I don't have to pay for a gym membership. It's right in the center of the downtown core, so I very rarely have to pay for public transit. I don't need a car, so that saves me money as well. And because it's so central, I find that my friends will usually meet me in this area. And even if we plan on going out and having a coffee, it's we can go out, we can spend on one coffee or beverage or whatever, and then we can come back to my apartment. So it's higher than living in the suburbs of Quebec anyways, but overall for my lifestyle and what I prioritize, it is pretty good. The next expensive thing that I still spend money on is investing in myself. And I feel like before I became a truly frugal person, really getting serious about my debt payoff, I was more open to spending a lot of money on investing in myself. So, for example, I want to say 3, maybe 4 years ago, I hired a personal trainer and I wanted to get in shape. So, I thought it was a good investment. And it was. I actually don't regret it, but it was probably almost $500 a month, which now I would like. I can't afford that, but I would not even consider doing it even if I could afford it. And then when I was living in Istanbul last year, I spent money, I think it was like 300 or 350 a month on full-time Turkish lessons, and I absolutely don't regret doing that. I learning to speak Turkish and being in a classroom setting where I was forced to practice and speak with people, it was so good for my social anxiety. But these days, I would not spend that kind of money. Instead, I do things like, for example, like I said, I want to improve my French. So I've been going on Preply and finding tutors who are just starting out. So on Preply, when tutors are just starting out, what I've gathered is that they set their price a little bit lower to build up their client base, and then they slowly raise it as they get more reviews and more credibility on the platform. So right now I can find decent French lessons, like one-on-one conversation classes, for like $7 to $10 per hour. Obviously, it won't stay that way as the tutors kind of like build up, but it's a good way to kind of like invest in myself frugally. And I'm doing that while I'm waiting for the government of Quebec provides free French classes for either Canadians from outside of Quebec or foreigners who come and live in Quebec. There's a wait list, of course, but once you get through the wait list, the classes, I think it's like 3 or 4 days a week for a couple of hours each day, and they're completely free. So even though there's a wait for that, I feel like I'm still able to do things in the interim that allow me to work towards that goal without spending too much. In the past, I've also taken swimming lessons that were free at the community pool when I was living in Nova Scotia. I invested in driving lessons, which was a bit more expensive probably than I'd spend now. I think it was like $50 or $70 per hour lesson, but of course that's like a fixed amount of time. I think I had like 10 lessons before getting my driver's license at the age of 32. And then the next thing I really want to do is take sailing lessons. I would love to take sailing lessons this summer. I wanted to last summer as well, but obviously that's something that is quite pricey. I have this dream, retirement dream, or early retirement or career break. I don't even know. I just want to live on a sailboat so badly, but I've never sailed aside from, an afternoon trip that I've taken with some friends or what have you. So, sailing lessons is definitely on my list of self improvement, but because I live frugally, I only want to do it when I have a sailing lessons sinking fund. And I am definitely not even close to prioritizing that right now. So, that will probably be a next summer thing, but we'll see. It took me a while to learn this one. I feel like the first year of my frugal living journey, which I've talked about before on this channel, I was not prioritizing myself at all. I didn't really know that you could strike a healthy balance, and I was not spending any money on healthy food, which now that is something that is like a non-negotiable for me, even if it brings my grocery budget up a little bit more. I always have fresh fruit in my fridge. I try to cook, like, I'm pescatarian but mostly vegetarian, so I try to cook like protein rich meals. Even though I'm not the best cook and it takes me longer than the average person, I do try to always have like a healthy dinner. And my lunches are usually like a smoothie or a hard boiled egg or something like that. I used to really live on like boxed pasta, which I still love, don't get me wrong, and ramen too, and just like toast for dinner, like the cheapest things that you could possibly get. But now I really try to make an effort to eat healthier, especially because I have other goals. I have fitness goals that you just can't meet by eating, toast and ramen for dinner. And this is something that I will always prioritize. Even if I had to cut my budget down, I would still find a way to eat healthily. So, kind of following that, another thing that I will always spend money on is building my community and maintaining my friendships. I mentioned in the past that I'm really into hosting, even in my tiny apartment, and I will never feel bad about spending money on things like kombucha or, getting olives and nuts and chips and having like a nice little grazing board for my friends when they come over. My next thing that I want to do is have a game night, which seems a bit ambitious for my tiny apartment, but I think it could work. And I'm currently shopping for a used Scrabble board. Before, I would not have spent money on something that seems frivolous, but now I feel like it's actually investing in my friendships, which I've learned are like the most valuable part of my life. I neglected friendships and community really hard when I first started living frugally, and I will never do that again. Like, it's so worth having your community there. It helps your mental health, it like plants seeds for your future, and it really like I can't say enough good things about leaning into your community and taking care of your friendships even when you're going through something like major debt payoff. It's like not worth cutting people off. Another thing that might be a little bit scandalous is that I prioritize little treats. And I don't mean running to the coffee shop and getting a $7 matcha. I mean buying chocolate or flowers at the grocery store if I see that it's on sale or if I'm craving something. I love having tulips in my house, and the grocery store by my apartment, they often sell discounted flowers for less than $10. And I feel like at that price, if the flowers are in my apartment for a week, it's okay as a treat from time to time. I've also recently gotten into baking batches of things like cookies or French madeleines and freezing them. And then in the afternoon, when I want a sweet treat, I take like 2 or 3 out of the freezer and I just bake them in my air fryer. And that gives kind of like, it gives the same feeling and satisfaction as running down to a coffee shop for a sweet treat, but it's actually better because I've made it myself. And then my apartment smells wonderful, like a little bakery, and I set them on a cute little plate that I have, and I make it like a whole romanticized experience that still feels like running out to get a sweet treat, but it's within my budget. And along with that, I also always budget for Pizza Fridays. So I look forward to this all week. Before I was in debt payoff, I would order pizza from this kind of like artisanal pizza place in Montreal that I really liked. Then when I started my debt payment journey, I found this. It's actually embarrassing that I've talked about this many times on this channel, but I found a $3.50 frozen no-name pizza. It's not a special pizza by any means. It's a literal like off-brand frozen pizza. It costs $3.50. It's obviously not healthy, but it does say that it's made in Germany, and as cringy as it is, I'm like, well, I am having a European pizza this Friday. But yeah, so I get that pizza every Friday, and I feel like I've romanticized it so much that I genuinely just like look forward to this, like the cheapest frozen pizza you can get at the discount grocery store. But then I also pair it with, I used to pair it with wine, like a cheaper bottle of wine. I'm currently sober for Q2, so I'm pairing it with kombucha right now or ginger beer. And honestly, it's like doesn't cost that much, and I feel like I look forward to it more than I was looking forward to the takeout pizza that I used to spend like $50 on. So the next thing I feel like might be a temporary thing, but I'm currently okay with spending money on interior decor and home items. I moved into the apartment that I'm in right now less than 2 months ago, and that was after living at my parents' house, before that living in Istanbul and getting deported, and before that having a breakup drama and having to declutter and get rid of basically everything I own. So this is the first apartment I've been in that really feels like it could be a stable base for me. And when I first moved in here, I had pretty much nothing. I mean, I had like a bed and like this desk I bought secondhand a couple of years ago and stored it at my mom's house. But other than that, I pretty much didn't have anything. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to make the same mistakes that I made before when I would just spend, like to solve problems, basically. It was like, I don't want to do that. I want to be intentional about this space. But at the same time, I just really wanted to feel moved in and comfortable. So I did spend probably about $1,000 between the couch that I bought, the appliances that I bought. A lot of it was like necessities. Like I didn't want to do the whole minimalist, like no furniture, living life on the ground kind of thing anymore. I just wanted to feel comfortable. So I did splurge on a sofa from Wayfair, a patio set, what else? A couple of kitchen appliances, Honestly, it was probably less than $1,000 that I spent. It was probably around $700 Canadian that I spent to like feel moved in and comfortable. I did a gallery wall, which I will eventually maybe show in a video, but a lot of the stuff I got from the dollar store or I like thrifted, so that probably cost like less than $50 altogether. I hung everything myself, but I definitely did spend on getting comfortable in this apartment, and I think I don't regret it. I kind of like wrapped it into the moving debt that I had, which I'm human. But I do think probably in the next quarter, I will add home decor and like home stuff in general to my no buy list. But to feel comfortable and moved in and like feel like I'm ready to start this new phase of my life, I don't regret spending that money to get comfortable here. And the final thing that I still prioritize spending money on is travel, but not in the same way that I used to. So when I tell you I was spending thousands of dollars, possibly a month, on travel between flight upgrades, fancy hotels, whatever it was, putting it all on credit, I was really going for it. So now I have absolutely no travel planned in the future because I want to do it responsibly. So I mentioned before, I really want to go to Korea. I've never been there. I want to go to Saskatchewan and I want to go back to Istanbul, but I'm not doing any travel until I have the money in a travel sinking fund ready to go. I don't want to put anything on credit. And I honestly feel like these kinds of trips just feel better. Like you can go on the trip and genuinely just relax and not worry about what you're spending. I mean, not that you won't worry about, I don't go wild when I'm traveling, but like if you have a set amount that you know you can spend, that you have sitting in cash ready to go, then you can, I don't know, the trip just feels sweeter. Like, for example, I went to Macedonia this summer with my boyfriend, and flying from Istanbul to Skopje was like under $100. The Airbnb that we booked, I think it was like $30 a night. And the food and drink there was pretty affordable too. So the whole trip all in for a long weekend, I think it was like, I want to say like $300 for, yeah, I think it was around $300 Canadian. And that was on the like history of trips that I've done as a travel writer and also as somebody who was just overspending on trip. Like I've been to 50 countries. I've stayed in some of the best hotels in the world. I've flown business, whatever. I've been to all 7 continents. And this long weekend trip to Macedonia was one of the most memorable trips I've ever been on. And it might have been the cheapest trip that I've ever taken. So, food for thought when it comes to travel. So, yeah, those are the quote unquote expensive things that I still prioritize as a frugal person paying off debt. I feel like it's so important, and I've said this so many times on my little soapbox, but like figuring out the things that you prioritize and the things that you don't, it really makes frugal living feel so much more sustainable and enjoyable, and you don't feel like you're missing out on anything. And I feel like I've really hit the sweet spot between the things I prioritize and the things that I don't mind living without. Anyway, if you're still here, thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.